Well, Australia's Foreign Minister, Senator Bob Carr, says he'll meet with his British and French counterparts in London to step up the diplomatic pressure for the release of Australian lawyer Melinda Taylor. Now, Ms Taylor and several colleagues from the International Criminal Court are being held in Libya after meeting with Muammar Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam. They were on a United Nations mandated mission when they were taken into custody after being accused of spying. Well, Senator Carr joins us now from our London bureau. Senator Carr, thanks very much for your time this evening.
My pleasure.
What's the latest in regard to Melinda Taylor and the prospect of her and her colleagues being released soon?
Well, I don't want to talk about expectations of us getting what we want in this case, which is her immediate release. We've got some way to go yet, I think. There's talks with the Libyan authorities involving us and the representatives of other nations representing those detainees. 3 other nations have got detainees associated with the International Criminal Court. We're working with the International Criminal Court. I spoke to its president only yesterday, and they're talking to the Libyans. There are discussions with other nations. I spoke to the French foreign minister already. I've spoken to the foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, to Canada, and we're hoping that we can get our common sense proposition up, namely that Melinda Taylor was working for the International Criminal Court and deserves to be given immunity from this sort of action.
Given those international voices that are rallying there, given that you say that you've put up the common sense proposition, what do you think it will take to bring about a change of attitude among the Libyans and secure that release?
I would think some level of negotiations between us and our friends on the ground in Libya and the Libyan government. The other complicating factor is the unsettled and fragile and complex nature of politics in Libya. I think everyone recognises that there's a transitional council in authority in Libya, but perhaps in Zintan the lines of authority are a little more clouded. We've got to deal with a situation where the politics of the country are uncertain, where the overthrow, the Gaddafi dictatorship, has left the weaknesses of the country exposed. No independent judicial system, an inadequate civil service, not a strong civil society, and shortcomings in all the institutions that we take for granted in other more settled societies.
Given you are dealing with that fragile and splintered political landscape there, how confident are you about the information you are receiving in regard to Ms Taylor and her colleagues?
Well, the important thing is we've got our Ambassador David Ritchie in the country. He's a non-resident ambassador. He's our full-time ambassador to Italy, but credentialed to Libya. He's there. We've flown in consular staff from other posts, Cairo included. We're working closely with other nations on this. I was relieved when he was able to get to Zintan and spend 90 minutes with Melinda, and he was able to establish that perhaps surprisingly her conditions in that prison were fairly comfortable. We've got 2 priorities. One is to see that consular access continues to flow to her. That is, that she can see David Ritchie more frequently, more regularly, and she can make calls to her husband Jeff and her mother and father John and Janelle in Brisbane. But secondly, and above all, we want her to be released so she can be reunited with her family.
But it's too early at this stage, or too fraught for you to even suggest a time frame in which that may play out.
Yes, that's correct. All the indications are that the Libyan authorities are taking this very seriously, and they've described her conversation with her client as being a grave security matter. We, of course, are arguing that she was carrying out a duty for the International Criminal Court, a body established by international statute, and a body that should be able to operate in Libya under the overarching Security Council resolution that mandated intervention in Libya. She was carrying, ironically, she was there to carry out a defence-related function, a defence of the son of the former dictator. But of course, we're dealing again with a political system that is very complex and very fragile, not least because of the strong hatred running towards anyone associated with the former dictatorship. So given that situation, I've got to, unfortunately, stop a long way short of expressing confidence that this is going to be resolved any time soon.
Minister, on another matter, Syria. Earlier this week you were in Saudi Arabia and talking with your counterpart there. What did you discuss about Syria and how to bring an end to the conflict?
Well, we had wide-ranging talks with His Highness Prince Saud, the Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia. We spoke about the nature of the contest for power inside Saudi Arabia. We spoke about the example provided in Yemen of a transition of power supported by the international community and the applicability of this model to Syria. In Yemen, a president was given impunity. He stepped aside. He was replaced by his deputy. That was ratified by a referendum, and there's a transition to a new political arrangement. Could that be applied to Syria? If the Annan peace plan were established and there was a ceasefire and there were consultations between the parties, it is certainly an option to be explored, and Turkey and others have discussed it. But unless there is a ceasefire, and that is the first of the Kofi Annan recommendations, then we simply haven't got a set of circumstances in which that peaceful transition can be pursued.
The push by some countries and some experts on the region for a regional conference to search for a compromise where all regional players are at the table, including those that have been shunned by the West, notably Iran. What merit do you see in such an approach?
We think we should continue to talk about it. I know there are reservations about the participation of Iran, but I think the best thing is to talk, and to talk with some urgency about the composition of a conference and about the task that would be given it. The international community, however, is a long way short of unanimity on this, and unless the conference is able to leverage a Security Council resolution, then getting implementation of that Kofi Annan peace plan is unlikely to flow from the simple convening of a conference. I'd like to think differently, but I suspect that until Russia takes a different approach with its major ally in the Middle East, Syria, then we're not going to have acceptance of one, ceasefire, and two, the peaceful engagement between the regime and its enemies. And they're the two most important of Kofi Annan's 6 points.
When you say a different approach by Russia, do you mean you expect Moscow to abandon its ally?
No, we can't expect that. But we can ask Russia to explore whether the government in Damascus will release itself of President Assad and offer up a different figure who might head the government on the basis that he or she would be in negotiations for a peaceful and political settlement of the difference between the government and its opponents.
But what then? There's great concern being expressed by Moscow and others that the West hasn't expressed a cogent plan for post-Assad, and that could be a potentially frightening scenario for that big what then question.
Well, that won't emerge in any other way than through negotiations between the government in Damascus and its opponents. We can't prescribe from outside Syria a durable peace plan unless it's got some resonance inside the country. And there are other models of transition, but not necessarily in the Middle East. At the present time, looking at the still unsettled political climate in Egypt, I've got to say we fall a long way short of having a happy model to point to.
Minister, finally, you're in London. You've been chairing a Commonwealth ministerial task force looking at ways to strengthen and to reform this body. How relevant, or conversely irrelevant, do you think the Commonwealth is, particularly for Australia's interests and push in this region in this so-called Asian century? Well,
here's one observation. The Foreign Minister of the Seychelles said at our conference, it was a conference of 12 foreign ministers that I was privileged to chair, he said that the Commonwealth is the only body that reflects the interests, that amplifies the voices of the small island states. He made the point that 20 of the 55 Commonwealth member nations, are small island states, and they don't get heard in other fora. They've got a real voice in the Commonwealth. Another consideration is that the Commonwealth treats... This meeting I chaired had India, with a population of over 1 billion, and the Solomon Islands sitting there. And what other body provides a quality of membership for member states, regardless of their wealth or their military strength or their population size? The Commonwealth is unique in that respect. And there, at the conference of the forum, was Rwanda, a country that put up its hand to join the Commonwealth. They opted to join the Commonwealth and attended their first CHOGM in Perth in October last year. So this organisation, which can be dismissed as funny or inadequate or antiquated, has actually got some acute relevance, especially given tasks like election observers. When it comes to sending election observers in to troubled parts of the world, or parts of the world with limited experience in democratic transfer of power, the Commonwealth has got enormous credibility. They're in Papua New Guinea at the present time, observing the elections taking place there this month. I think there's more to the Commonwealth than meets the eye, and I think getting that charter and endorsing other reforms was a very important step forward.